Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and gentle musical meanderings. Welcome to 2024. I hope to adorn your new year with lots of great new music. This is the first in a series of 12 posts that I put out there that are my preview posts. This is music that I kind of got over the holidays, that I was listening to sort of right around in December, backlog of music. And the albums in these posts are going to go on to form Tier 1 for my 2024 Best Of albums. So, let's go and get started. The first one I got up is Peter Gabriel's I.O.
I can read other minds and scan all the thinking, all the juice I can find. And it's I've got the water on me. It's all waking me up. I've got the sunlight warming my back, warming up.
Now, in my mind, after 1980, Peter Gabriel started basically releasing an album a decade. In the 80s, it was So. In the 90s, it was Us. In the 2000s, the aughts, it was Up. But in the 10s and the teens, he didn't release anything. So it's been nearly 2 decades since Peter Gabriel has released an album. And this album, I.O., has kind of been on the back burner. During all that time, he's finally got it put together and released. In the 70s and 80s, Peter Gabriel started getting into this real-world music aspect of his persona, where he was trying to gather music from different cultures and find ways to incorporate it into his music. And if you were to listen for that, his last 3 studio efforts from back then all had this kind of, ethnic background to it. This album is noticeably bereft of a lot of that stuff. It's the most British-sounding album that he's had, and I don't know, probably since the mid-70s when he very first went solo. And because of that, it actually kind of has the most progressive rock feel to it, kind of traditionally speaking. It has the straightest line, I think, between what he was doing with Genesis and what he's doing now, today. Like a lot of Peter Gabriel's music from the past, it's got dynamics and it's got contrasts galore. He sings beautifully, still has great control over his voice, still has that crystalline quality, and despite being crystalline, still being kind of raspy. I would say there's a sense a little bit that Peter Gabriel's kind of melodically repeating himself a little bit here. You can listen to this album and still hear echoes of things that he was doing, particularly on Us. But his music still has that expansive, open quality that you'll always enjoy with the Peter Gabriel album. And this one's particularly interesting too because he released this in 2 versions, the dark side mix and the light side mix. So this always causes a problem for me because I like to have a prime version of an album. So for me, the prime version of this album is going to be the dark side mix at first for the first 6 months. When I come back in the summer, I'm going to review it on the light side mix and kind of get entrenched enough to be able to hear the differences. Okay, next up I got Foxygen's Hang.
Stop making me feel. Yeah. I know sometimes everyone wants to be someone else. All you people know that it's true. Yeah. So follow the leader.
Now, one of my top albums from last year was from the Lemon Twigs, and they were a band that kind of referenced the past nostalgically very well. Foxygen also has a very clear deference to the past, but for these guys, it's kind of this pervasive 70s sound, particularly that 70s sound when studio orchestras were the prime vehicle by which you'd fill out the sound of an album. And I wouldn't call this album cinematic like I did some of the other albums from last year, but I think it's very theatrical. I hear reference to things like Van Morrison, David Bowie, and Elvis Costello, but with a very kind of Broadway feel to it, almost like the Ziggy Stardust era of what David Bowie was into. My criticism of this one, I would say that some of the arrangements, just on first glance, feel a little bit redundant, especially the first 2 songs up front have sort of this call and response format with the backup singers doing response to the lead part. And the first 2 or 3 songs to a degree have this same structure and it feels kind of repetitive. But it also takes real stylistic chances later on in the album that kind of give it a little more diversity. So that criticism may not hold up as I get myself more entrenched in the album. Okay, next up I got The Night Terrors, Pavor Nocturnus. Okay, here's one of the real weird ones for you. The Night Terrors had just gotten off tour with sort of progressive rock and horror movie soundtrack mavens, the band Goblin. And due to their success on this tour with Goblin, they got commissioned to do this piece of music that incorporated the grand organ that's in Melbourne, like the biggest pipe organ in the Southern Hemisphere. And the result was this album that's written for grand organ, drums, electronics, and theremin. And man, you just can't get any more gothic than that. And it is a really interesting listen and way more engaging than it would seem. Interesting thing about theremin is that because you don't breathe on theremin, you have to be very careful about the phrasing. It can kind of create melodies that are endless because all you have to do is move your hands around to make it happen. And I think the thereminist Miles Brown does a pretty good job of phrasing in a way that makes these melodies in this album make sense. And finally, I got up Billy Woods and Kenny Segal's Maps.
Mississippi stopped in New Mexico. I ain't seen my folks. It's strangely I feel right at home on my own. 3 oboes, 1 clarinet. Black rainbows, the night wet. The room smell like Marrakesh. Dubstep drift in the window, I sit at the desk. It's a party outside. Some have, some overdressed. They was going off during Playboy Cardi set.
This is the second full collaboration between Billy Woods and Kenny Segal, and it was kind of conceived and written on the road during a really kind of intense time of touring right after the COVID pandemic restrictions were lifted. And as such, Billy Woods describes this music as a travelogue. A lot of the words were written while he was on the road. I think something like 70% of the lyrics. Now, this is very new school rap, and I've been sort of struggling with this recently because I'm a fan of old school rap that really locks into a groove. When more new school rap thinks about longer passages and thinks more of like in terms of it being a spoken word, it still interacts with the beat, but it doesn't dig into the beat in the same way. And so I struggle with this a little bit. And I'm trying to get my ear and mind open and around this newer style of rap. And with any kind of rap album, really, in order to give it a really fair shake, you've got to really dig into lyrics. So I've been looking at these lyrics and trying to study them a little bit. And at first, I think they seem really obtuse. But as I've been listening to them more and more and really closely inspecting how they're kind of constructed, there's a real logic to it that makes you feel like that you need this like a secret decoder ring to understand the whole thing. So there's some depths to this album that I haven't quite plumbed yet that I'm looking forward to in the coming months. That's all I got for you this particular post, okay? So keep your eyes open for the next one. If you like this one, please like and subscribe and share it out with your friends. Also, follow me over on Spotify. I've got a all new for 2024 radio list you should be checking out as you go along. And if you're interested in getting involved in the 2024 viewers bracket, please follow my Patreon link below. And until you see you next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.